So once again, thank you very much, John, for being here with me. I'm truly honored. It's really a pleasure. And so I pointed out some questions, but basically there will be compositions of thoughts that I'm having that I find it quite interesting, and I want to hear your thoughts about it. The framework where I will put it will be based on like Spengler, Toynbee as well, and this idea of micro-civilization regarding the current times that we're living, and this appetite to transcend biology that we can see in the Faustian man, and the idea of having a universal state after this moment of Pax Americana that is finishing. But first, to start out, I would like to ask you, because this is a reoccurring thought that I'm having, is it possible to interpret the dialectic process, the Hegelian dialectic process, the Hegelian telos, not as leading to freedom, but rather to a kind of extinction of the species or the current species, or even to a moment of singularity and technological convergence? Because I'm having this reoccurring thought, like even the way I learned the dialectic process was mostly like the Cold War, the idea of like United States and Russia and the convergence of the thesis was, one of the theses was the, conquering space, going to the moon, this type of thing. So is this like a drive to accelerationist drive and the convergence and singularity? Is it the telos that Hegel talked about in the dialectic process?
Well, it makes me think of Carl Schmitt's book, The Nomos of the Earth. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He remained an unapologetic Nazi all the way to the end.
Yeah,
he never became. And ironic is he's had a huge influence on leftist political thought, especially Giorgio Agamben in his book Homo Sacer. I went back to read Schmitt because I wanted to understand Homo Sacer, and there was no way around it. So I had to go back and read Schmitt, Political Theology first, of course, which is his most famous book, and then the Nomos of the Earth. And in the Nomos of the Earth, he goes through and he talks about these three different phases of Western European civilization, where he's talking about three different ways of organizing the civilization in terms of the nomos, the order of the earth. First being the medieval nomos, where you have the infidels are out there, and the West is here with an emperor and a pope, and that becomes the primary means of organizing the society. But after the discovery of the New World, in that 16th century there, as they're reorganizing Europe, and they're trying to figure out how to divvy up the spoils, who gets what, what's legal, is piracy legal or not, in this, all of that. As the great powers are working all of that out, they come up with basically what Schmitt calls the Jus Publicum Europaeum, which is the JPE for short, which is the public order that organizes the nation states from the period of about 1600 down to the end of World War I, pretty much, which ended it. And in that that particular organization, war was legal. Not only was war legal, but it was generally regarded as civilized. One country can declare war on another. Let's say Germany declares war on France, then it needs an outside party who is neutral, either Belgium or Switzerland, whoever it happens to be, to adjudicate, as it were, the legalities of the war. But you conducted war in a civilized manner. These weren't annihilation wars. You didn't go into, Napoleon doesn't go into Goethe's Weimar and wipe the place out and enslave the populace, rape the women. It's civilized warfare. In fact, they meet and have a civilized discussion. One of the great moments of the Napoleonic Wars there. And so it's astonishing to sit down and read through this concept of war used to be civilized. You catch glimpses of it in movies like Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon, which is in the 18th century, glimpses of it there. And then World War I comes along, and now it's all about annihilation wars. It's about completely exterminating your enemy. War, at the end of that war, as the League of Nations was coming into being, Kaiser Wilhelm II became the first war criminal, the first person to be tried for war crimes. Now war is illegal, and not only is it illegal, but when it happens, that's it. We'll firebomb your cities, or we'll nuke Hiroshima. There are no rules. And so the way that Schmitt saw this playing out was this this is not a civilized way to conduct war. Surely there's another way. And then he's talking about the outcome now. When he's writing the book, I believe this is 1950 something, mid 50s, and he's talking about, well, the two world powers now, we have yet another nomos of the earth with Russia on the one hand and the United States on the other. And these two powers have organized a new kind of territorial nomos, which is to say, to use his German word, Großräume. These are Großräume, great realms of space, and there's only two of them now. Russia with all that land in Siberia going all the way down to Vladivostok and so forth, and then with the Monroe Doctrine declaring it, we own these waters for all around us, including Canada. If you enter into within 100 miles of our shores, we'll consider that an act of war. So these two gigantic powers, and that's where he ends the book, where he sees who knows what this outcome is going to be. But it does sound like a dialectic. It does sound like a thesis, antithesis, and now where's the synthesis? Now, we might be in the middle of it right now. That may be what the problem is. Anytime that you have a synthesis of civilizations, there's always pain, suffering, violence, as the two civilizations. It's sort of like, I don't know if you've ever read the epic, I'm working on my version of it right now, the Gilgamesh epic, where the two tough guys meet, Gilgamesh and Enkidu, and they have a fight in the street, and because they're both equally strong, they can't best each other, so they become friends. So it may be something like that that's happening now.
Oh, I see. But the thing is, like, I'm very curious. Obviously, now I'm currently living in Japan, so I have this outside look in a way to the Western world. But I'm always kind of fascinated of like the current moment. I think the pendulum is quite swinging to the materialistic approach, and I read this passage in the study of history from Toynbee that I found it quite interesting, where he mentions that nomadic societies display a superiority in several ways. And he says, like, as the domestication of animals is clearly a higher achievement than domestication of plants. And the current quote is, the shepherd is a greater virtuoso than the husbandman. And this leads me to the analogy of the sacrifice of Abel and Cain, in which Cain offering terms of agriculture, a product of human ingenuity and forward-looking perspective. And this basically because here at the East, of course, there's a perception of future, but if you go to the Hinduistic, it's all Maya, it's all an illusion. The Buddhist is also like the type of detachment, so it stays on the present moment. But we can see that the Western civilization is characterized by this constant preoccupation with the future. And is it there, like the Cainic roots, like is it there where the accelerationist drive origins that we even now, like we could say that Hinduistic, like it's kind of a Kali Yuga period, or like a moment where we kind of detach of any type of spirituality. So do we have this accelerationist drive according to this Cainic foundation of the Western civilization?
Yeah, I think you could say that the accelerationism does come out of the Faustian drive for infinite space, as Spengler puts it in Decline to the West. And that means infinite everything, infinite time. We have the most detailed knowledge of the history of life on this planet than any other civilization has ever had. Nay, the solar system, or even beyond the universe, all the way back to the Big Bang, assuming there was only one of them, which I doubt, actually. Yeah, that's all Faustian. That's a very Faustian drive to conquest. You walk into a cathedral in the 12th century, let's say, walk in there and all the vectors are pointing your head up to the ceiling. You know these people are going to go to the moon. That's you know they're going to.
Yeah.
Who's not going to go to the moon? Well, the Persians. If you read the Shahnameh, they have a story in there about King Cavus, who is one of their great kings, but he had the hubris to try and build a flying machine made out of eagles. You know, you sort of put an eagle at each of the 4 points, and you put like the proverbial carrot on a stick, only it's a piece of meat. The eagles keep trying to get at the meat, and as they're doing it, the machine flies up into the heavens, but then he falls. He has an accident and falls, survives it, and his courtiers admonish him. They say, you see, That's what you get for messing with the realm that belongs to God. Humans have no trespass there whatsoever. You're not going to go to the moon. The civilization that has the a priori bias of infinite space, that's going to take us to the moon. Now, the other shoe here in this is that, and this is what one of my favorite French postmodern philosophers, Paul Virilio, talks about. He's a decelerationist. He's the exact opposite. He points out that in his accidentology, which he more or less created, the sort of science of accidents, where he's talking about the faster you go, whatever conveyance you're in, the more the likelihood is that you're going to have an accident. He says that the invention of flight is simultaneously the invention of the plane crash. And that's right there in the Daedalus and Icarus myth. It's yes. Right there. Icarus crashes, Daedalus doesn't. But for every Daedalus, you're going to have a few Icaruses in there. When you invent the boat, the Titanic, you're going to have a ship. You're simultaneously inventing the shipwreck. It comes along with it. You invent high-speed trains, you're inventing the high-speed train wreck, which will come right along with it sooner or later. So that's the problem with accelerationism, is this reckless disregard for consequences. And for those who have studied their media studies and their technological studies, such as Marshall McLuhan and Lewis Mumford, these guys are very thorough warners about what happens when you have constant cultural innovation and stimulation. Sooner or later, you're going to have a breakdown. A breakdown is, whether it's a civil war, let's say, whatever it happens to be, is a means by which the society gives itself permission to catch up with itself. So breakdowns are inevitable the faster that you go. So I'm very skeptical about the whole, let's go faster and faster with everything. Why? Why can't we? I've hardly had time to enjoy one new technology, then you're already thrusting another one in my face. How about giving some time to enjoy? Like right now, I'm using, I've discovered artificial intelligence, as particularly Google's AI Gemini, to be, it can create images that are just as good as the images of my favorite science fiction, fantasy, and horror cover illustrators could do, like Michael Whelan, let's say, or Frank Frazetta. These guys could do back in the 50s, 60s, all the way through the 80s and 90s. My AI can spit out images that are the same quality, exactly the same as a Michael Whelan painting, who is the best of all of the sci-fi illustrators. Those guys are now out of a job, because you can sit here and do this for free, tell it exactly, and the whole thing I've learned in dialoguing with Gemini is specificity. If you want the image to turn out right, you have to specify every single little detail, and then take time saying, no, iterate it again. And in some cases, the images, I've gone through 25 different iterations until I got the aha moment and put it in the book. These are illustrations right now from my reworking of the Gilgamesh epic, which is called Gilgamesh Redux Squared, because it's a second version. My first version I published back in 2017, and it was just the text. There were no images or full color and hardcover and all these wonderful things that are coming along. So there's a lot of goodies. There's a lot of toys that comes out of this accelerationism, but slow down.
Yeah.
Please, for God's sake, let me enjoy what you're giving me first, and then we'll move to the next thing. So it's a little reckless.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Are we not, as a Faustian man, like you said, this on the Spengler thought, like we observe this obsession with space, right? So, but space, and it's never enough. Like if you go to the Goetz Faust, the epic, like even eternal youth is not enough. So that's like the drive. Even this obsession with space, we can see it like clearly in the phallic, like the buildings, the skyscrapers, the way that we want to penetrate the sky, we want to get the dimension. But my thought is, like, obviously now I'm going through this stage, like I told you, I'm going to be 33, so I'm very into cosmology. Part of I have to thank your YouTube channel for that. And I always think to myself, like, this obsession with space, like, is is there any trace of a spiritual thought in the Western man right now? an idea that something is not accessible through space. This because, like, of course, through this materialistic lens, it's always like, oh, the universe is in constant expansions, is infinity. But like, is there like a spiritual dimension that is being eclipsed in the according to Spengler, like the morphology, like right now at the current moment? Is there, like, from the elite some spiritual realm, or is completely eclipsed by materialism? And that would segue to another question that I will make regarding this.
Yes, we're coming out of the apogee of scientific materialism that the middle of the 19th century brought about. Basically, from 1841 onward, the West became the official religion of the West became scientific materialism. We've deconstructed Christianity and shattered it. We know that the cosmology there is out of date, 2,000 years out of date. It does not suit our present situation. Only cosmologically speaking, though. Spiritually speaking, this might be a different matter, as Rudolf Steiner thought when he came along with the Theosophists and did a complete reformation of Christianity, basically created his own Gnostic mythology, which I find to be, as far as cosmology goes, I find Steiner's to be the most thoroughly satisfying. This is a Faustian man, German to the marrow, a German mystic, but with the same level of IQ as a Hegel or a Kant, only now he's talking about the imagination and mysticism and the different subtle bodies, the etheric body, the astral, all these wonderful things. That's an incredible spirituality right there. And also, of course, in the work of Carl Jung, where Carl Jung's tradition comes more out of the central myth of the Faustian West, as Joseph Campbell used to elaborate, our great American mythologist, is the myth of the unique individual, the individual who is a singularity unto him or herself. And you can, if you look back over Western European literature, you can see it already there. And we have, as Spengler says in Decline of the West, we have the loneliest characters in the history of literature. Siegfried, Parsifal, Faust, Don Quixote, they're all the lonely wanderers, and the Faust captures it all. The Rembrandt's etching of Faust alone in his study, he's got several paintings too of Faust-like figures. That captures the myth that it's the lone individual lost in the immensities of infinite space, which to him are full of all kinds of potential. So there is spirituality in there. That is the mythology of Faustian civilization, and it has nothing to do with Christianity. Christianity is what Spengler calls a pseudomorphosis on the West. It's a false formation. And he gives a great analogy when he talks about how the Magian civilization, which is a civilization that most academics can't see, they think they've got this ridiculous ancient medieval modern scheme that does not enable them to see the fact that you've got three different civilizations there. The classical civilization, for whom the earth symbol is the physical, tangible, especially athletic and beautiful human body. So all things Greco-Roman are sensuous and tangible. That's their symbol. Whereas as we've seen for the Faustian West, the symbol is that of infinite space. In between, though, there's another civilization, the Judeo-Christian, Islamic, Persian, Byzantine civilization, which Spengler calls Magian, for whom the uniting symbol is the world as a cave. All of their churches are caverns. But whether it's a Byzantine, whether it's Hagia Sophia, whichever you want, you walk in and it's a cavern, but it's not a cavern that goes up. It's a cavern with a sealed off dome. And the individual is not the myth there. The group is the myth, the consensus believers, as it says in the Gospels, with Christ saying, where two or more are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them. Why does it need to be two or more? Why can't it be just one lonely guy, some Faust guy and his study? Isn't there a spirituality there? It's a totally different spirituality. It's the spirituality of the individual, not the group. And so it's a false formation in the West. It was inevitable that the West would shed it, just as the Magian civilization had to shed their Hellenistic influences, both artistically. Spengler says the first mosque is actually the Pantheon. It's a dome with an oculus. It's essentially a new civilization struggling to express itself through alien form language, which lies so heavily over the land as a result of Alexander's conquests that it can't find its own feet until Islam comes along, and then suddenly, pow, get rid of all icons, get rid of everything. Let's get back to the way The Hebrews had it in the beginning with only one God, not this recrudescence of polytheism with all these different divinities and saints. And is it a trinity, or what? And what status is Mary? Getting too much back into polytheism there. And then so a whole new art cultural cycle comes into being there with the whole Arabic Islam on the one hand, and then Persian Islam on the other, both good at different things. Persian Islam specializing in mysticism and poetry with the Sufis and so forth. The Arabs specializing more in mathematics, science, and in philosophy. And then later, of course, at the end phase, along come the pragmatic Turks, the Seljuk Turks, for whom mysticism is nonsense, just like it is for the Americans, well, the whole Anglo world, just like it is for the Romans. It's all about engineering achievements when the Turks come along and they create what Toynbee calls the universal state for that particular civilization. And then you could feel Islamic brilliance and genius slowly dying down by, I would say, by 1600, it's a done deal. It's thermodynamic equilibrium there for that civilization. From that point on, it's all about the Faustian West. Well, Russia, meanwhile, is still slumbering in a pre-cultural phase that it has taken very long to get out of, primarily because it too has had a pseudomorphosis with Peter the Great, importing in around 1700, creating Petersburg and importing nothing but European modes of dress and fashion and decor and architecture. And I believe that Russia is shedding that pseudomorphosis right now, and that part of what is going on right now is the desire to stand, to discover its own sort of springtime religiosity. I've noticed in Russia that they're spending a lot of money right now building huge cathedrals. The Cathedral for the Armed Forces, for instance, it's gigantic, that almost dwarf any of our cathedrals that came out of our 12th century springtime. When a society is putting that much work and effort into spiritual works of architecture and art, this isn't a materialistic society. That itself is a pseudomorphosis on Russia. Underneath that is a fundamental spiritual piety and spirituality that is very profound and intense right now in Russia. Whereas in the Euro-American timeline, we're settling down into the winter stage of our own universal empire, which will inevitably culminate in the Caesars, some form of Caesarism returning. But along with that comes a sort of tired, exhausted second religiosity, second as opposed to the springtime initial religiosity that the society just wants to go back to sleep. It wants to go back to the instinctive pulse beat and rhythm of the earth, and it starts to feel the cosmos going again. When Augustus took power, one of the major things that he did was he reopened all these temples to all these different gods and goddesses. Astrology was all the rage. Mystery cults were all over the place. It was truly a second religiousness that comes in with the final thermodynamic equilibrium phase of the civilization, and that's where the Faustian civilization is at right now. We're entering into our political imperialism, but also we're open to new forms of spirituality now that we know that Christianity, the Magian civilization, had the wrong cosmology, but still the right idea. The soul is eternal. There is some kind of God being. There are something like angel beings. We've heard all kinds of accounts of them. And so more and more people with brains, this isn't just myself, there's a lot of people out there. Riza Georgiani is one of them. There's a lot who are looking for a new form of spirituality that is not Christian anymore necessarily, but that is not incompatible with science either. And I don't believe that science is incompatible with spirituality. The two are perfectly compatible. It just depends. But all you have to do is watch all the shows of Jeffrey Mishlove, who I grew up with. He was constantly interviewing very bright scientists who were mystically inclined, or like Rupert Sheldrake, people like that, didn't seem to have any kind of problem squaring science with spirituality. It's Christian cosmology that's not fit with science, because they completely disagree. Was the earth created all at once by a God being who created everything and put it all in its right place? Well, science says, no, that's not what the evidence says. It's been a gradual process of evolution through the cosmos, and that just doesn't square with what our Bible taught us. The Bible is a book, it's a great work of literature, but it's a book from a long time ago, from another place in a desert that has nothing to do with the Faustian West. So that's my comment on that, on the spiritual aspect of all this.
Yeah, but that interested me a lot. The winter phase that we're going currently, and especially like this convergence between spirituality and the scientific materialistic approach that we have. And I had this question that was kind of a segue, because now I'm gradually being more interested in cosmology, and I had this suspicion that the Christian one, it was not connected to the Faustian man, and there was like a kind of almost like a schizophrenia there, because obviously like it creates this polarity that that makes confusion, I would say. And I was asking because like we noticed like the hedonistic approach more and more, especially in this materialistic that we're currently living. And I was my question was, is there a link between this hedonistic philosophy promoted by figures like Aleister Crowley, for example, when he says do what thou wilt, like the idea that the moral transgressive kind of like hedonistic approach is the way to go, like this twisted version of like, not the twisted version of the Hubermensch, but still at the same time, like the idea that we are here and we should like take pleasure, or like that we should be liberated from that type of perception of like the going to redemption, going backwards in a way to return to the Eden. So like, and this emergence of moral transgressive elites symbolized by individuals like Jeffrey Epstein or like these type of characters, like could it be that among certain elite circles there exists not merely a pursuit of pleasure and power, but a form of transcendental logic or esoteric belief that justify or even ritualizes such behavior? I'm very curious about this at the current moment.
I think we're talking about a couple of things here. One is when you mentioned Crowley, so that makes me think of the occult Hermetic tradition that has been an underground form of spirituality in the West for a very long time. At least John Dee in England was not exactly underground. He was the most, at that time, he was Queen Elizabeth's primary thinker, philosopher, mystic, and he was trying to synthesize Jewish Kabbalah with Christianity. He believed in both, but he was fundamentally a mystic, more of a left brainer than myself. I'm more of a right brain thinker. But there were many attempts to sort of cancel him, what we would call canceling someone, which eventually worked apparently, because he and Elizabeth had a falling out when he and his medium, Kelly, and they were using Aztec mirrors that had been coming over from the New World to communicate with what they called angels, some form of spirits. And they were traveling around in Poland. Kelly got in trouble trying to get a prince to think that he could make real gold, which is a dunderheaded way of understanding alchemy. That's not what they were trying to do. But anyhow, they had a falling out. And when Dee and his wife returned, Elizabeth gave him the cold shoulder. And then after she's gone, then the Stuarts come in, James, and he's a witch hunter. He wrote a book on witch hunting. And so he falls out of fashion. That whole thing goes sort of underground, but not really. What happens is the Rosicrucians. So it crosses into Germany. And right around 1604, 3, 4 to 10, we get the founding texts of the Rosicrucian Society that are based on his book, The Hieroglyphic Monad. The monad itself, which I've tattooed to my forearm here, as the symbol. It's the symbol for my press, the iconic books that I'm creating. He has a whole book where he goes through and explains so you can unfold the entire cosmos from out of this glyph, and it's pretty amazing. So that glyph is on the first page of, you might say, the Gospel of the Rosicrucians, which is the chemical wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz. And an individual wrote it named Johann Valentin Andrii. And it's very, very difficult to understand. We did a whole class on it in my school, but they credit everything from Dee. And but the Rosicrucians become very murky and mysterious about their identities. They have a principle of keeping yourself anonymous. Andrii is one of the very few names that we can even mention who was a Rosicrucian. So it's sort of disappearing into an underground world, while science, meanwhile, is coming into being with new cosmologies. Chemistry is coming out of alchemy. Astronomy is coming into being in the 17th century out of astrology. I think probably Kepler was really the last thinker who could still practice astrology and not have people laugh at him for doing it. It's unfortunate because I'm an astrologer as well, and I understand it very, very well. And I feel sorry for people who simply say astrology doesn't work because it can't. How can you get anywhere with that attitude with anything, assuming something a priori doesn't work because it can't? What do you mean it can't? Sit down with me and I'll demonstrate right now that it not only can, but does work. And I've had about 300 astrology clients, something like that, over the past few years since I started giving astrology readings publicly about 4 years ago. I haven't had one dissatisfied client. I've had several clients who are on the fence about it, but they didn't walk away on the fence after we sat down with it and looked at the transits, looked at the events in your life and see the correlations. Astrology is never wrong. The only problem is it might get misinterpreted by a bad astrologer. Those happen. There are lots of those people who aren't very good at it. You have to have a sort of intuition, and you have to have a good grounding and understanding archetypes of the collective unconscious. It helps quite a bit understanding astrology. But anyhow, so the spiritual systems, the streams are there. And then with Rudolf Steiner, of course, he tried to bring it into the mainstream at the time. But then it gets into this conflict with Jung and Steiner despised each other. And so we have to ask why, because they're both right with different concept systems. They're both getting at the same reality. So what's wrong here? Well, Jung gets himself into the trap that if he takes the Theosophists seriously, and he would have lumped Steiner in with the Theosophists, even though he was way more brilliant than any of them, then he can't be taken seriously as a, quote, scientist. He's trying to make psychology a science. Both him and Freud were trying to make it a respectable science. We can't have astral planes, astral bodies, possession, bizarre things like that, table tapping seances, and all this kind of nonsense. So he made a mistake in lumping all of that stuff together, but he likes astrology. It's interesting. So why is it that astrology works, but none of the other woo-woo stuff does? And he sort of keeps it under the table really until the 1950s when he writes his book on synchronicity and starts trying to come out of the closet a bit about spirituality. It's not just all in your mind. There is a real world, spiritual world out there that is not physical. And that the physical world is only a thin, and not even a very thick, a thin sliver around this whole astral universe. We go to the same place when we die that we go to every night when we dream. The astral plane, it's a real place. The collective unconscious is just simply Jung's pseudo-scientifically respectable word for the same thing that Steiner was calling the astral plane. And Steiner had a very clear understanding. Steiner missed the boat on astrology, though. See, he lumped astrology in with table tapping, woo-woo, and seances, all that kind of thing also. So he missed the boat on astrology. And he didn't understand dream interpretation very well. Jung was second to no one at dream interpretation. Not even Freud was anywhere in his field. As good as interpretation of dreams by Freud was. So we've got spirituality coming in here from these maestros, but you have to understand what their biases are. It fascinates me to compare them. Any philosopher, Toynbee and Spengler, the same way, who would not have liked each other. I know for a fact Toynbee never, he read Spengler, but didn't like him. He dismissed his German mysticism. This is good old-fashioned British empiricism translated into the philosophy of history now. So Spengler and Toynbee are replaying the same old debate between the German idealists and the Anglo-empiricists all over again. Only two different philosophies of history. They're both right, though. You just have to know how to interconvert their ideas with each other. Like the universal state that Toynbee talks about is the same thing as Spengler's Caesarism. They're the exact same thing, and so forth. And he even has a series of stages too. He denies morphological determinism. That civilizations are not living organisms, but yet when you sit down and look at his model, what do we have there? Every civilization has a genesis. Every civilization has a growth period. every civilization has a breakdown period, and every civilization has a final period where it creates a universal state and is invaded by barbarians. It ends up being a seven phase model. And he says every civilization does this. That kind of sounds deterministic to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all about where you want to put the spin, where do you want to put the bias. So I have a lot of fun, comparing different thinkers. And I know this guy's right, and I know this guy's right, but yet they hated each other. Like Gene Gebser, for instance, who despised Martin Heidegger. He just didn't understand what Heidegger was saying. Heidegger was living fulfillment and embodiment of what Gene Gebser called the integral consciousness structure that he saw coming into being here. And essentially, I don't know if you've discovered Gebser yet, but Gebser is really the monkey wrench that, you throw it in here because he's read both Jung and Spengler. He's from Germany, and he moves to Zurich, where all the psychoanalysts are giving conferences and so forth. He does not have a PhD, though. So he does not have higher degrees and so forth. He's a maverick. He's on his own. And so what he does is to combine Jung with Spengler by saying that, look, what happened in the 19th century wasn't the decline of the West. It was the decline of the West's mental consciousness structure, which is beginning with the Renaissance, is the second phase of the mental consciousness structure that began with the Greeks. So that's the first phase of it. Then the Renaissance is the second phase. Then in the 19th century, his word for decline is deficient. The rational consciousness structure becomes overly rational and becomes deficient because it excludes all the other consciousness structures, the magical, which is tribal, the mythical, which is Bronze Age, high civilization, and the mental thinks it's the only one that's valid. But the integral consciousness is what's coming in out of Spengler's disintegration. There is the integral consciousness structure, which I think Gebser really demonstrates supremely in the second volume of The Ever-Present Origin, where he goes through and he looks at modernist architecture, modernist painting, modernist literature, modernist politics, modernist science, and he goes through and demonstrates how time now is being brought in. Time is in the integral consciousness structure what space had been for the, you might say, Faustian, but he says for the mental consciousness structure, the second phase of which is Faustian, basically. He doesn't use that term, but he means it. And the integral, though, comes in and recognizes the validity of all the different consciousness structures. Let's say you're at a rock concert. You're all united by the tribal music. You're all one. You're all, that's what the magical consciousness structure does. It sees everything is interwoven with everything else. It's a cosmic principle of unity. And that gets activated at a rock concert. That's exactly what it is. You go into a movie now and you're activating the mythical consciousness structure, which is all about storytelling. Myths are stories, and that's a different consciousness structure there that's valid for stories. The mental is what you activate when you want to solve a calculus problem and get the equations to come out right and so forth. It doesn't mean because you're solving that calculus problem that the other two aren't valid. And so this is the integral consciousness that recognizes the validity of them all, and especially what he calls the irruption of time. Time now gets added to the three dimensions of space in Einstein's spatio-temporal four-dimensional unity. The fourth dimension is integrated. Right now we're reading in my course in my school Thomas Pynchon's novel Against the Day, which I've never read before. Pynchon has been my favorite American novelist all the way. He's now officially, this novel is the bomb. I think initially, we're about 2/3 of the way through it. I read about half of it and I realized it's probably the second best novel ever written by an American after Moby Dick. But now another third of the way into it, and I'm thinking, you know what? I think this is a greater book than Moby Dick. This because he goes in, if you're familiar with Gebser, he goes into that same time period there, right around the turn of the century. It begins in 1893, and I think it ends in 1925. And he examines the transformation that happens. And because Pynchon he's hemispherically ambidextrous. He can do higher math. So he understands, he's linking higher math at the time with Minkowski and Einstein and all of those guys who were trying to figure out time as the fourth dimension. But Pynchon's interested in connecting all that to astral forms of spirituality. because he shares basically the same paradigm I have. Astrology, he can do astrology. He correctly calculated the astro charts of both Mason and Dixon in his novel Mason and Dixon, so I know he knows how to do it. And it's all about the multiverse, which is the Earth symbol for hypermodernity, the multiverse. Parallel timelines, parallel universes, wormhole tunnels into different realities. That's all in Against the Day. It's amazing. It's an astonishing novel. We're about to lose him. He's getting old. He's in his late 80s, and he's got a novel coming out in August or October, actually, that Shadow Ticket, that I'm very much looking forward to. But I don't see how he's going to top Against the Day. I don't see. It's just this thing. If you're not familiar with this thing, is a monster. It's over 1,000 pages and I used to weigh 5 pounds. So, but the ideas in it are, and the characters are so wonderfully so good with funny characters, and he has a great Joycean sense of humor, which I feel is lacking in Cormac McCarthy. I just don't. I feel that his worldview is very narrow and very constricted by this evil archon neo-Gnosticism idea that we're all here as a punishment. He's got that totally dead flat fucking wrong. Every single person, not just every single person, every single soul in that ant over there on the ground came here voluntarily, willingly and joyfully, willing to let's go down to the Earth has the reputation for being the toughest planet, at least in our Milky Way galaxy, of incarnating on, and consequently the most popular. It's the K2 of spirituality. You're ambitious. You just want to come here and be a drunk. That's already ambitious. The spirits have automatic respect for you just for coming down here. So again, it's and Pynchon and Joyce both share that the same level of erudition, the same sense of humor, that life is a joyful Nietzschean, Dionysian eruption. Nietzsche understood it perfectly. Schopenhauer did not. He was more in the McCarthy pessimist mentality that's just not getting. We're here to have fun.
Yeah.
Never ever did. He went around sulking. Same, just like Beethoven, as opposite to Mozart, who was more the Dionysian, Nietzschean. It's a typology, two different temperaments.
But I would like to ask you in the same way, because obviously I finished reading Synchronicity, and I was reading a lot of Carl Jung, and obviously it's the most like scientific approach that we have on the current zeitgeist. I think Carl Jung is getting quite popularized regarding this approach to spiritual through a scientific lens. The Synchronicity is just like it's basically that.
Give you a helping connection here. There are 3 things that I figured out that took me forever to realize they're the same thing. Synchronicity is one of them. The 2 others are the law of attraction, which I used to dismiss as New Age nonsense. It's not. And the other thing is Gene Gebser's first consciousness structure, which he calls the magical consciousness structure. And it simply proceeds by the principle of morphic resonance. It has nothing to do with punishment, good, bad, ethics, or morality. It's that like forms resonate with like forms. If you put 2 clocks, old-fashioned pendulum clocks, on the wall, and they're old-fashioned with real pendula, and they're out of phase, they'll gradually start swinging in phase.
Yeah.
Women living in dorms will synchronize their menstrual cycles. They'll all happen along the same week. That's morphic resonance. And it's the same thing as the law of attraction, which is that you get what you think about, whether you want it or not. That's a separate issue. If you're always worried about catastrophe, you're going to attract catastrophe. It's not ethics, it's physics. It's metaphysical physics, basically. It's morphic. And that's what synchronicities are. They're glimpses that show you that there's a deeper reality of a world of thoughts and ideas that are out there, not just in here. The brain is not just, we think we're having our own private little Faustian thoughts, like Faust sitting in his lonely study, but he's actually transmitting his thoughts too out into the ether that will then attract him into situations that those thoughts brought about and attracted him to. Eros being the first civilization situation rather that he attracts, and then later the whole civilizational life cycle in Faust Part 2, one of the greatest works ever written by anyone on this planet, Faust Part 2. Most people skip it because it's too hard. It's like Ulysses, it's like Finnegan's Wake, Moby Dick. Guess what? That's where the good stuff is. The root stuff that takes a while to chew. It's like good steak. It takes a while. You got to work on it, keep chewing it, and get the juices out of it. That's what these guys are like, or Turkish, sipping Turkish coffee. Have you ever done that? You can't do that in a hurry. You're just little sips. That's what these guys are like, these great geniuses. And by the way, every single one of these guys believed in spiritual cosmology. Every one of them. Rudolf Steiner, Goethe, Joyce. Surely these are the highest IQs we've ever produced on this planet. They don't seem to have trouble with trying to reconcile their intellects with their spirituality. They take it for granted that the two are woven in together. So people who deride spirituality is, part of it too is this. I started out in the New Age. My first book was a New Agey book where I was going around interviewing scientists that had mystical inclinations and trying to see where that might lead. But after I finished that book, number one, I discovered Rudolf Steiner after that and found the cosmology that I was actually looking for. But number two, I began to have this feeling that part of the problem with the New Age and why it's such a dismissive brush-off term is it's anti-intellectualism. It is very the Shirley MacLaines, the American popularizers who are kind of embarrassing to listen to because they don't have any IQ at all. They know the spirituality is right because they feel it emotionally, but they don't have IQs. That's problem number one. Number two is it's all kitschy art. If you think of the art of Alex Gray, I don't know if you know, it's just kitschy. It's syrupy. It doesn't have a kind of high, like great Christian art, whether you like Christianity or not. You can't say that it never produced great art. Those visions made all kinds of great art possible. So that's the problem with New Age. But on the other hand, having come back all the way to my second Saturn return, your first one is at 30 and your second is at 60. I turn 57 next week. Coming back around now, it's brought me back to surprisingly a kind of New Age paradigm all over again. I had left in the middle of my life to go find the intellect, to go read Kant and Hegel and Schelling, read the good stuff, but it has brought me back full circle to realizing that the New Age, basically, their spirituality is basically, it's correct. There are chakras. Astrology is real. There are chakras. Shamanism.
It's a relationship that you create now.
Ghosts are real. It's correct. It's just kitschy and it's not very smart. It needs a brain.
Yeah, but how does the concept of I'm very fascinated about, and I saw in your astrologic approach as well, like the concept of reincarnation. And I would like to ask you how this concept challenge the modern Western view of identity and linear time. Because obviously it's a thing that we cannot still, I think, at least that's my opinion, we cannot still integrate it in our Western idea of linear time, and we really struggle with the concept of reincarnation. And at least I don't see it in any of our manifestations.
So what happened with reincarnation was this. It was part of the Christian paradigm to begin with. Father Origen was a 2nd century AD philosopher living in Alexandria who laid out the basic Christian theological paradigm that everyone else presupposes, including Augustine, 3 centuries later. And he believed in reincarnation. He was a contemporary of the philosopher there, Plotinus, actually. Those two must have had very interesting, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for that. These conversations. But what happened is by the time you get to the 6th century, at the Second Council of Constantinople, about 553, reincarnation gets officially anathematized. For what reasons, we do not know for sure, but it probably has something to do with this. And I think this is how Steiner would explain it, is that the West, it was at odds with the West's karmic task as a civilization, which was to develop the ego. And that's what he sees as the primary task of the West was. And reincarnation, at least at first, seems to contradict that. I remember Joseph Campbell saying somewhere, if you've got reincarnation and you're watching a play, a great tragedy like Oedipus Rex, it sort of undermines the tragic pathos. This guy was just one singular guy who never was before and never will be again. And the West likes that tragic pathos, that Hamlet pathos. But Steiner says, okay, we've done that though. So we've spent the centuries coming down the pike to the 19th century. The West has fulfilled its task karmically. Now it's time to bring the truth of reincarnation back into it and synthesize it and realize. So what he does is just before his last series of lectures before he died in 25 or 26 is called Karmic Relationships. And it's a multi-volume, it's my favorite work of his of all time, 8 volumes, where he gave all these lectures where he starts talking about the earlier incarnations of famous European thinkers, philosophers, and artists. And it's really amazing. He talks about, just for instance, he's talking about the past lives of Marx and Engels. He says Marx and Engels actually were, because he has this ability to what he called read the Akashic record, sort of like what a medium would do. And he said back in around the 9th century, those two, Marx, they were both adventurers, but the Engels individuality at that time took over Marx's estate when Marx was away doing one of his adventures. And then when he comes back, he finds the Engels individuality in possession of his property. And then so he can't get it back. So he gets a group together with him and they go through conspiracy about how they're going to get the property back. So then when they reincarnate as Marx and Engels, property becomes the primary issue between them. And not only that, Engels pays Marx's bills in accordance with what I call, not Steiner, the law of karmic balance. Since he stole from Marx, now he has to pay back. You do the favor back again by, not that these two knew this consciously, that's why it's called karma. You don't know what your karmic entanglements with someone in your life is, but I can tell you this much. The people in your life, whether friends or enemies or family members, those are the people you have karmic ties with. You can be absolutely 100% certain of that. If there's a rough relationship, you guys got stuff still going that you have to work out, that you're spending lifetimes you haven't worked out yet. So I don't think that it's at all incompatible with the Faustian ego, because the Faustian ego is always going to be there. It's a myth, and myths don't die. It will be there forever. They don't go away. It's a done deal. We've accomplished that for the planet. And the rest of the planet will look at us like, those guys are crazy, like the Chinese do. Those guys are crazy with all their anarchistic individualism. Well, look at our civilization. Look at what that anarchism achieved. We respect Chinese civilization with its group mind orientation, certainly. Beautiful. Look what you guys have achieved. Look what we've achieved, and so forth. Every civilization is good at something that the others are not good at. There is no one civilization. And I think that's the great thing about Spengler's Decline of the West, that he was the first to present that paradigm to Western intelligentsia. Guess what? We're not the center of the world. It's a Copernican model, not a Ptolemaic one, where the West is at the center with all the other civilizations revolving around it. We're just one of those other civilizations. Each one is its own center that thinks it's the center of the universe. The Chinese have always thought that they were the center of the universe and that they didn't need anything from any other civilization. They've always thought that. But these guys are great. The German thinkers, German philosophers, German and Hindu Indian philosophers, I think, have just produced the most profound thinkers ever on the planet. They just get it right.
So you think, I have this question regarding the concept of Ahriman of Steiner and the descent of Ahriman. And my question would be like, could AI, artificial intelligence, be a manifestation of this force, like a hyper-intelligent yet soulless order?
That's right. That's exactly how he would put it, because for him, he has an opposition between Lucifer and Ahriman. And Ahriman, which is borrowed from Zoroastrian cosmology, is the the god of materiality that wants to convince you that matter is the only thing that matters and nothing else. Consequently, all forms of technology are manifestations of Ahriman to one degree or the other. Whereas Lucifer is more like India, that wants you to believe that the physical world isn't real, and there's only a spiritual reality. And so they're both wrong and both right at the same time, which is why he has the Christ being. He did this great sculpture with he's Ahriman on one side, Lucifer on the other, and the Christ being is in between them. It's the balance of both. But there is this thing about, he created the Waldorf school system, which is wonderful. I think that I wish I could have afforded to send my kid through it, which emphasizes the imagination and the humanities, learning how to play musical instruments and draw, paint, sculpt, do all these wonderful things. But it is kind of technophobic. That's one of the things about that I've heard from teachers and people who have gone to Waldorf schools. It is kind of technophobic. So that's sort of you might say the Achilles heel of the Steinerian view of the world. It seems to think of anything technological as a threat, and that's not necessarily the case. I'm on the fence still about AI. It's fantastic for illustrations and so forth. But there are all these apocalyptic anxieties, which is what my novel, Every Angel is Terrifying, is about. And the reason why I called it that, which is Stephen Mitchell's translation of the opening line from Rilke's second Duino elegy, Every Angel is Terrifying.
Yeah.
And I thought the novel is about the first person story of a girl growing up on a military base, basically Luke Air Force Base, out in the West Valley in the Southwest in Phoenix, which is where I grew up, Phoenix. And she's growing up on that base with a patriarchal father who is creating the world's first clone, human clone. And the family doesn't know that their son, and she doesn't know her brother, is actually a clone of the father. He's actually cloned himself. And they're living on the base so that the boy can be observed by all the people in charge and so forth, to see how he's coming along and so forth. This is a terrifying technology to me. These are like AI, nuclear power, and genetic engineering are all technologies that theoretically could end life on this planet. Any one of them contains that danger built into it as a technology. That's why these are like technologies that should only be left up to angels. These are terrifying technologies, but angels know them because they create entire universes mastering these kinds of technologies. They know how to manipulate genes and atoms and so forth. So that's the issue. Now I'll say this: as far as synchronicities go, this is a pretty good one. I finished the book about a year and a half ago, I think it was, maybe 2 years. I've lost track of time. I've already written a sequel, and I'm in the middle of a third one. And we were doing a class on Baudrillard. So we're reading Baudrillard's famous book, Simulacra and Simulation, which I haven't read since college. So I'm reading through it, and I get to the chapter on clones. And the opening line says, well, so we've accomplished cloning now. Human clones are now real. Like, this was written in the 80s. What the fuck is he talking about? I look at the footnote to a book called In His Image by some guy named David Rorvik. Okay, so I go chase that book down online. I pull it off of Internet Archive, copyright date 1976. And then I start reading it. It's nonfiction, and it's written by a journalist who at the time specialized in writing articles about genetic engineering. And he's telling how he was contacted by this very wealthy Elon Musk type of guy back in that time period, who wants him, since he knows the field, to find genetic engineers for him who don't have any scruples about creating a human clone of him, because he doesn't have any children, and he wants his empire to go to his son, and there isn't one. And he's not married either. Who knows why, but the narrative doesn't say that. But then so he does. He finds 5 or 6 genetic engineers who are saying, yeah, we'll do it. Just pay me the money. So they go, and he doesn't say where or which island this is in the Pacific. He just says they set up on an island somewhere in the Pacific this genetic engineering lab to produce the world's first human clone. Sound familiar? It's obvious that Michael Crichton read this book. Jurassic Park comes out 83, I think. This is 76. the wealthy millionaire corresponds to the tycoon with white hair who builds some vague island out in the Pacific somewhere. But anyhow, so the journalist says he had been led to believe that they were going to do this gradually and start with bacteria and work their way up the chain of being, but they go straight for humans. And he's like, I thought, why are we? Because they say it'll take us forever, number one. And number two, we already know how to do it. We know that we can clone a human. We know exactly what to do. So he tells them the theory about injecting the nucleus into the female cell and all this stuff, getting it to reproduce into a blastula. And the trick is to get it to reproduce past 64 cells, so then they can take that blastula and implant it into a woman's uterus, which is essentially exactly what they did. They found some willing native, sounds a lot to me like someplace in the Philippines, maybe, girl who was a virgin, willing to do it. The money was interesting for her and her family. And so she agreed to it. She carried the child to term. And then they moved to San Francisco to actually give birth to the child so that it would have U.S. rights. So that's the story. Now, the odd thing about this is, number one, it sounds true to me, but do the math on that. I was talking to a medium. I interview mediums all the time when I want to know things that you can't find through books. And I asked her, so when do you think that we're going to experience the first human clones? And this was about 6 months before I discovered the Baudrillard's footnote. I said, when do you think that's going to happen? And she said, it's already happened. I said, what are you talking about? And she said, there are clones right now walking around who are in their 40s. I was like, oh, that's weird. So 6 months later, I read Rorvik's book, do the math on that. 40 years ago, roughly 76 is when the book came out. They would be in their 40s. And the book ends with him saying he's going to do more than one clone. It ends with one successful one, but he was clearly had interest in doing other clones. So this isn't official science because it happened outside the boundaries of the system of peer research and journals and papers and authorities. It just went around all that, like I've gone around academia, for instance.
The clone history story is quite interesting. And I was thinking about the Toynbee framework as well. And could we interpret this transhumanistic will as the foundation of a new universal state, like not in the geopolitical sense, but as the final cultural phase that seeks to preserve and simulate meaning through technological continuity after the spiritual core of a civilization has died? So it's like the continuation, but not in a spiritual way, just in the continuity of in the new universal state. Can we interpret like this?
You mean going more into the realm of media and technology and less in the humanities?
Yes, exactly.
That's a disaster right there. That's just a recipe for disaster, because the humanities are the guys like me. My dead girlfriend, Mary Church, she was a Luddite. She was a total Luddite. It's our job to say, hold up the mirror to those guys and say, look what you guys are doing. You're turning the planet into a wasteland. We need to be the conscience of these kinds of guys the Elon Musks, who I didn't realize that we sold the sky to Elon Musk until, what was it, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
I walked outside my house one evening after it had just gone dark, and there goes a fucking UFO right above my head, like this row of lights. I'm really close. I watched it sail away, and I got onto my Substack, and I was very excited. I was like, I've just seen my first UFO, because I know they're real. And then it turns out, no, that was Elon Musk's new Skylink satellite system that's in low orbit. Nobody notified me that he owns the skies. How come Elon Musk owns the sky? And nobody gave me a heads up that I might see something in the sky that might resemble a UFO and might confuse the shit out of me. So we need the humanists. It's their job to keep us grounded. The George Lucases, the Steven Spielbergs, the Rembrandts, the Goethes. We need Goethe's humanistic anti-Newtonian science to put checks on Newton and his arrogance. His color theory may be wrong, actually. And I believe that it is. Goethe's is correct. However, Newton's he's an institution, as is Goethe, but for humanistic reasons.
Yeah, but as you said, like, for example, the academia is a corrupt institution right now. Even the science without the scientific method, like, you can see this willingness of, like, this appetite for immortality, this isolation drive through the elites, like, and that also segues for another question that I have, that is like the current geopolitical moment that we're living as. Can we consider it as the end of the Pax Americana and the beginning of the collapse of the nation state in a way? And in the West, could there be like that breakaway civilization that wants to have this transhumanistic continuity? This is like more like a composition, not as much as a question, but like I'm always doubting and wondering if that's the case.
When you look at Spengler's timeline, though, we're not in the Pax Americana, nor have we been. Where we're at is where Rome was after the Punic Wars. There were 3 Punic Wars. They end around, what, 164 or something like that BC. And now Rome is in everybody's business. It's not an empire yet. It's got another 164 years to get to the Pax Romana. And it's in everybody's business right now. That's where America is right now. But on his timeline, the year 2000 corresponds to 100 BC. And 100 BC is when they've settled all their conflicts with other people, and now they start suffering from an autoimmune disorder with all of their Roman civil wars, Sulla and Marius and so forth. And then with Toynbee's excellent concept of the proletariat, there's an internal proletariat that is disaffected from the body social. It's in a body social, but no longer of it. And you get Spartacus slave revolts like that, those kinds of disaffected revolts. And so it has to solve all of these social problems. And it ends up doing it with wars, with the Battle of Actium and the 2 triumvirates and so forth. Once there's one guy standing, and it's Augustus Caesar, or Octavian, because he had a higher military IQ than anyone else. It was like Napoleon quality. Now it's 270 something years of peace before it starts falling apart under the time of Diocletian. We wind up with 3 different emperors, and then it's chaos again. We're not there yet, but that may be what is trying to work itself out here to get to that kind of Pax Americana.
Mm.
I don't see it happening, though, without equal power being given to China and Russia. I mean, in a way, the triumvirate right now is a global triumvirate. It's not just 3 wealthy guys. It's 3 wealthy nations who are equally powerful: China, America, and Russia. So there is a kind of triumvirate right there. Can we work it out without destroying each other? Doesn't look like it. Apparently now we're at war with Iran. I stopped paying attention to the news because I'm tired of being pissed off all the time. And I'm enjoying my life creating books and novels and poetry. And it's what I'm here for, not worrying about who's going to drop a nuclear bomb in my house. Fine. If it happens, it happens. I don't think it's going to, though, because you have to realize what we're seeing is only the outward play of all different lines of karma that individuals and civilizations have, and then also their spiritual beings that are presiding over these groups that you don't see. And these are like in the Iliad. When you read the Iliad, they're watching the battlefield, and then the gods are having conferences. Basically, what's going on? They have conferences. Who's going to incarnate? Take on an avatar. Athena will hop down. She's an old woman who helps a soldier. Things like that. That Homer had it right. If you just don't call them gods and you call them spirit guides, like Steiner does, that's essentially what's going on. So I think they have too much invested on this planet to let us just blow it to pieces. I don't think they're going to allow that to happen. They can put ideas in people's heads. They can. I've done all kinds of experiments with this. They do indeed. When you are creating something, you think you're creating it. You're not. You are being inspirited, inspired. There's a portal that's open to the astral world. And that paradigm of the muse is actually literally correct. I don't know if you know the iconotype, Matthew sitting there with the angel whispering the gospel into his ear. That is literally true. That's exactly what happens when you create. Then, as I've learned from talking with mediums about all the dynamics here, when I'm writing, what am I doing? Don't write when you're drunk, because when you're drunk, it lowers your vibrational frequency. And when you're writing, you're open to the astral plane. You don't want to attract the wrong spirit. End up like Jack Nicholson in The Shining.
Yeah.
You don't want. So I make clear boundaries and separations. And then so when you're creating something, it's your guides feeding you ideas. They can put them into your head. You could choose to act on them or not. And then that's when you bring your ego in and you go back over your paper and you change this and that and the other thing. That's all you doing that. That's the intellect, the ego. But the initial flow of the creativity is coming from spiritual beings. And that's the mystery of creativity. That's exactly what's going on. People wonder, how can you be Stephen King and sit there and write one great story after the next? He's just a channel for spirits that want these stories to be realized on the planet for whatever reasons they have. He's just a channel, just a clear one. He wrote most of his books while drunk, by the way.
Yeah, so we're tracking the wrong ones, right?
Yeah, up until he was about age 40. I think he wrote his best books. Salem's Lot, The Shining, The Stand, go down the list, The Shawshank Redemption. He wrote his best. Cujo. They were his best. You think, I went back, I did an experiment because I grew up reading him. He was what got me excited about writing fiction and novels and so forth. I went back a few years back and reread some of the early books like The Shining, and they're pretty junky writing. It's like a mess. It's a wonder any kind of great story got told out of this at all. It's literary mush.
Yeah.
But then after I stopped drinking, I read the sequel to The Shining, which was written Dr. Sleep. I wanted to know what the movie was coming out. I wanted to, so I sat in there. The prose is very good. Now he's got his act together. It's very good writing. It's acceptable. You can turn the pages and it's respectable writing. It's nowhere near as good a story though. The Shining is way better.
Yeah,
Doctors can't get anywhere near it.
But
so the dice roll. It's not that you can't write and drink or get stoned. Or they do different things. I've done experiments. Like if you're on THC, you will notice things about what you wrote when you were sober that you wouldn't notice when you're sober. And then you come back when you're sober to take a look at what your THC self thought. Usually it's better. It's a little better. There's a little more inspiration there and spiritedness. But you need that sober intellect to come back in and tidy things up. Otherwise, you end up with a William Burroughs disaster. I don't know if you've read his novels, Naked Lunch and The Soft Machine and so forth. They're a lot of fun, but they're pretty messy. Those guys, the Beats, when they were living in North Africa, they were mostly just popping hash candies constantly while they were writing. So the writing is a lot of fun, but there's not much in the way of revising. And they have a whole aesthetic. The Beat aesthetic is don't revise.
Yes,
what
exactly.
comes out, and consequently, it's a mess.
Yeah, it has to be, no? That's part of the movement, the Beat movement.
It's totally wrong. I think Naked Lunch would have been a much better book if it had been had proper editing, and some of those the Soft Machine and Nova Express. I think they would have been much better with a good editor. But anyhow, that's how it works. That's how the ego, and it works the same way with your life. So spirits will put ideas in your head to, let's say, maybe you should write that guy that you told to go to hell an email and ask him for forgiveness. Now it's the ball's in your court. You have the idea and you're like, I don't know. That's your ego now, your free will. So your free will is playing ping pong with ideas that they're presenting to you. You could do this if you wanted to. You would just have to humble your ego and go and apologize to that guy. He might snub you, but chances are, it's been in my experience, most people will forgive you. You know, if you burn bridges and so forth, because everybody fucks up. Everybody does. It's part of karma. It's part of why we're here, to learn how to treat each other.
But on that note, I was recalling like one of my first psychedelic experience with mushrooms, and I remember like being very obvious, the existential love, the idea of agape, and even the idea of Maya was like very obvious. I was trying to like throw away all these intellectual concepts and try to see what answers I would got, and it was almost like a feeling. It was like obvious. It's obvious all the time. And I was making these intellectual compositions in my head, and like it's almost like I was fighting a force that was like so grandiose that he was telling me it's obvious, don't.
Got a story for you. So this is an anecdote that occurs in one of the books by the hypnotherapist Michael Newton. He's dead now, but he invented or co-invented regressive hypnotherapy, where he could regress you back to remember not only past lives but also what you were doing in between your lifetimes on what he calls the life between lives, the other world, and so forth. And so, and Steiner had this right too. He was talking about the life review long before. This was back in the 1910s that he was talking about the life review is the first thing that you experience when you go to the other side. And that didn't get empirical evidence until the early 70s, when Raymond Moody wrote his study on near-death experiences, life after life. Was it life after life? Something like that. And then it's so common now that it's a cliche that you have to have the life review. So this individual was remembering that you go in front of your council of elders, the group number varies, depends, and you're there with your guide, who is almost sort of like an advocate for you, and they ask you to review your life. And so you go through it, and you yourself are your own judge. They don't judge you. They ask you what you think you could do better, what needs more work, what do you think, maybe you're too rough on women, or whatever happens. Maybe you need an incarnation as a woman. They offer suggestions, not judgments. So the Egyptians sort of had this right. It is a kind of judgment of the dead, but not exactly. You're your own judge. So in this particular case, he's talking about all his ego achievements, whatever they were, that he's very proud of. And they're like, we're not interested in that. Do you remember the bus stop? So he's thinking, what the fuck are they talking about? And then he's like, oh, you mean that day when I was late for work? It was probably some 9-to-5 Wall Street guys. It's one of those. And on his way up the street to his job, and there's a woman crying at the bus stop, and he stops, and he sits down with her and talks to her for a while till she stops crying. Then he leaves, and he's like, with his elders, he's like, that's what you guys are interested in? Yes, we are.
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, like I totally understand.
The stuff that you don't think matters. It does. Yeah. How you treat people, every little bit of your, kindness, gratitude. And we should have gratitude as much as possible. Yeah. I'm just as big of a fuck up as anyone. I mean, I'm too big of a fuck up to preach. Yeah. I'm just passing along what I've learned from these books and research and talking to spirits and mediums and all this kind of stuff that I just no longer have any fear of, or getting into this. You kind of have to. Most people will not talk to mediums. I had all those astrology clients, and maybe 2 of them took my advice because they wanted to know about their past lives. I said, talk to a medium if you want to know about your past lives. Nobody ever does. A couple of guys did, and they had some really interesting results. Because most people, they don't want to feel gullible. That's number one. Number 2 is the willingness to risk being wrong. And I'm totally happy to risk being wrong, because everything for me is a work in progress. All my ideas, everything, because they change over time. I kind of like Plato. If you read through Plato, he changed his mind quite a bit. He starts off in the Apology by having Socrates say, as he's about to drink the hemlock, to fear death is to presume to know what death is. Okay, that's his first one. 5 dialogues or so later, he's taking us on a grand tour through the afterlife with the soul and its reincarnations. Yeah. Plato changed his mind. He's got new information and so forth. So I kind of think of it that way, not like a Hegel where it's just, here are the laws. Yeah. That's what you do if you just want to found a religion and you want to stiffen and stop knowledge. Yes. And just put it in a Urantia book let's say, and this is the official book with, there are no other ideas that exist outside this book. Yes, there are.
Yeah.
I guarantee.
Yeah, it's like a boat, man. You're in the river and you want to cross to the other side, but it's very important that you don't focus on the boat. Like then you say to people to the side, "Oh, look at my boat, look at my boat, how fancy it is, the ideas that I have." I'm always very interested to go to and to cross to the other side and understand. But that's what I was saying, like in that experience, it revealed to me like quite obvious. And my poetry, I write poetry, and it's basically that idea of like the discreet kindness, to be kind in the small gesture. And that's the most important, is the small gesture, the one that gets unnoticed. But the thing is, like, even now, I'm going through like a spiritual awakening, I would say, because of a lack of a better term. And what's happening to me is that I'm losing my ego in the process, and I don't necessarily think it as a good thing. So that's the question. Like, I'm studying Buddhism as well, and that this idea of detachment and so on. Like, but I remember in that psychedelic experience, I was feeling this bliss and this idea of like, oh, if this is death, I want to go back. And me, like, I'm still 32. I'm gonna be 33 in September, and I had this vanity, like my writing. I write fiction. I do this. I go to the gym. I work out. I try to cultivate my body as well. And now in this moment that I'm just like standing there in stillness, seeing through those illusions, those mirages that kept me walking in this like existential desert. I don't watch the news as well. I try to zoom out because I'm also tired of getting pissed off, and it's mostly predictable as well. But like, it's like just the spiritual awakening is like Sisyphus, like the myth of Sisyphus, the idea of Camus. Like, now I need to go back the mountain and smile, bringing the boulder until the top. And what I'm asking is, like, is it true that the idea of like the karmic relation is to clean our karma and to have this recall, this going back and just staying there in this collective God, let's call it like that, like in this collective, and not coming back to the physical realm? Or
yeah, the paradigm is like this, and this is the way Michael Newton puts it, and he did a really nice job of this, where he's talking about the soul and its colors, and he figured out that the soul begins white, and these are newborn souls. They emerge out of the whatever prime source energy that produces souls, and they're white, and they're spiritually immature. These are the guys that are incarnating as criminals, Vikings, rape, plunder, pillage. These are children, spiritual kindergarten, spiritually speaking. They're still in kindergarten. Then as karma accrues, it starts to get a pink hue, and it starts turning kind of red. And you're still the service to self versus service to others axis, which in astrology is Aries versus Libra. Aries is me, and Libra is what about the other person you want to form a balance with. So gradually, what will happen over time is the soul evolves and the color changes it to yellow, and then eventually to blue, and then finally to purple. Is in the middle of that period of your incarnations, you start to stop resorting to violence to solve your problems. Now you're aware, you're midway through the process, because you're aware that it's not all about you, still about you, but it's also about others, and having compassion for others. Others are in this too. Pay attention. Then as you move into the later end of the spectrum, the blues, you start incarnating as service people, doctors, therapists, healers, nurses, etc. These are people. You ever wonder why people, I mean, it's obvious that the money is there, but that can't be the only reason why someone would spend their entire lifetime devoted just to helping people just because. It's because they're spiritually very evolved individuals. They just don't realize it, but they are. And then eventually you'll get to a point where if you have enough karmic experience and you want to become a guide. So what are guides? It took me a long time to figure this out. Guides are humans. They're not angels. Angels never incarnate as humans. Guides are humans who are nearing the end of their incarnational cycle. And so then they become guides for a group of souls, and your soul group, everyone has a soul group. And Steiner got this right too when he says that we reincarnate in groups. We absolutely do. And we keep changing our theatrical roles in the play. Let's say you were dad last time. Why don't you be my sister this time? And we change the roles around. And then, but it's sort of like a teacher with a classroom of pupils. There might be one, my group has 4 guides, apparently, in a very large group, 25 or so souls. Then you can become a guide, finish off your incarnations if you want to. You might feel there's a last few there. I get the feeling Steiner is probably just about wrapping it up with that last incarnation. Then you become an ascended master, which is to say, you don't have to incarnate anymore. You've learned every conceivable thing about being incarnate as an animal or plant or whatever, or any conceivable incarnation on the physical plane, on other planets as well, not just the Earth. And you're done. You're ready to become one of the organizers over there. Now you get to tell the guides what to do and so forth. And those are the spiritual masters. So that's what we're all aiming for through this process, to get to that point. And every one of us will eventually. So my question is, what I'm wondering is, once we're all there, are we being prepared for a new octave where we've all been put through the alchemical process of applying the fires of passions and desires to melt those metals down and then extract the gold? Then what? What do we do with all these gold souls? Is there going to be a new stage now where all these souls will play a different play, relate to each other in different ways? It seems to me that it just keeps on going. It's one plate after the next, and there's no ultimate omega point like Chardin has. I don't think there is. I think the omega point is relative to each one of these universes that's going on. Okay, you're done there. You guys are ready to star in a new play. I get the feeling that it's something like that.
Oh, that would be my question regarding the omega point. But do you think the let's call it the elites, or the not academia, but like they have this understanding, like this understanding of like reincarnation, like the concept of a soul? Do they like suspect those type of concepts, or they just like discard it? Because I see this appetite and this drive to do this like Faustian bargain, like this idea of like externalize, having external systems for everything. So like, do we still have the capacity for that true inner freedom, or are we like outsourcing? Because I think a lot of the Asimov Foundation as well, the idea of like psychohistory, like, and the idea of trying to predict and have models and have this algorithmic way. So we're externalizing even our knowledge. Like we're becoming more dependent on purpose, I would say. And then I think about, like you said, Elon Musk owns the skies, the idea of Blade Runner, the corporativism, and like that's the reason I was also asking if it's the collapse of the nation state, because we see these big corporations trying to like use these models to.
That's what Gravity's Rainbow is about. Have you read Gravity's Rainbow?
No, I didn't. Gravity's Rainbow.
Thomas Pynchon's most famous book, but it's not his best. Mason and Dixon is it's about twice as good as Gravity's Rainbow. Against the Day is twice as good as Mason and Dixon. He just keeps getting better and better. The dude's amazing.
Yeah.
But that's what the basic premise of Gravity's Rainbow is, which is set during World War II, near the end of it, when the Nazis are still hurling V-2 rockets at Britain, and they're being firebombed by the Allies at the same time. And the question becomes, Pynchon draws your attention to the fact that notice all these corporations like IG Farben, which is one of the big German corporations for organic chemistry. Notice all the deals that they make with the American corporations. They make all these kinds of deals that go on between them that doesn't seem to have anything to do with the Allies versus the Axis powers. That it seems like there's another thing going on here, all these shady backroom deals.
Exactly, yeah.
It's disintegrating the nation state. And maybe the nation state did disintegrate. Maybe that's what that war was about. And now it's an illusion that we think we're still living in, when actually we're being run by, everything's being run by corporations. And that's what the novel is about. Tyrone Slothrop was classically conditioned as an infant, as a child, to have an erection every time a V-2 rocket launches. Classically conditioned.
Yeah.
Which is like, you know, it's automatic that you ring a bell and the dog salivates whether there's food there or not. How much free will does that dog now have? And so Pynchon asked the question about Slothrop, does this guy have free will anymore, or doesn't he? And eventually he breaks away from them, and they lose him, and he becomes a myth. He disappears into mythology, where they're mythologizing about this guy at the end of the novel, who breaks free from corporate classical mind fucking basically everyone. So that's what that novel's about. It's an important novel. You should read it. Everyone who reads literature should have read that. It's like Moby Dick or Ulysses or something. It's just, you have to do it. It's essential because the themes, it was written in 1972, and the themes are even more glaringly pertinent today than it was in 1972.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. 1972, but do you think like there's this obviously now with the technology and AI and the models and everything, like a psycho history, that idea, like you talk about Caesarism as well, eventually arriving, that could be in the Asimov terms, can be like the mule, or like
that's the wrench when the mule shows up. And he introduces what is it called? Lucretius calls it a swerve in the system. The system didn't see coming because it was using statistical probabilities, but it's not taking human free will into account. That's the whole great thing about Asimov's story, the mule. That's the breakthrough. It's Tyrone Slothrop breaking away from the corporations, and nobody expected that he would do it because we have free will. We do. Even though we have karma that has brought us into various situations a priori, we didn't know how we were going to use our free will to respond, though, to those situations. That's where the rub is. Your girlfriend cheats on you numerous times. Do you use your free will to forgive her or say, fuck that bitch? Then you end up repeating the same situation with someone else, as you'll do in another lifetime if you don't figure it out. That's the whole game. How are you going to use your free will?
So we have free will, but at the same time we can say it's like predetermined as well, like the big question.
The situations are predetermined.
Yes.
But no one knows how. You didn't know either, which is why you got curious and thought, what if I lived a really difficult life, as I have, that's taken forever to get recognition or fame of any kind? Would I still persist? Because I'll tell you, my last lifetime, I don't know if you know this, I don't know which videos you've watched, but my last lifetime, I was my own great-grandfather, and we have all his records and data and so forth, pictures of him in our family albums. And he was a surgeon who was trained at Johns Hopkins. Back then in the 40s, that's as good as it gets. But meanwhile, he's in the Army too, and he's all the way up to the grade of a major. So he's a major and a Johns Hopkins surgeon. Then he volunteers to go into World War II. 1942, I think, or 40, it might have been closer to the end of the war, 44, I think. And he works on wounded soldiers in a MASH unit, saving lives. And he comes back with PTSD, but he works it out. But that's an easy life, socially speaking. That's a chick magnet, man. That's instant respect.
Yeah.
Too easy, socially speaking. That's too easy. He thought, let's do it rough this time. Let's do it rough. Where he was a womanizer, so consequently women have treated me like shit this time around. Betrayed me, took my son away, cheated on me. So how do I deal with that karma? And how do I deal with the karma that I can't get social respect much? Saturn is my highest planet, by the way, and when Saturn is your highest planet, that means late life success. That's what Schopenhauer had. He didn't get recognition until his 60s. So Saturn slows everything down, especially when it's midheaven, which means that's where your career is. If Steiner had it there too as well. He also had late life success well into his 40s before he get much recognition. So it's obvious what the karma was, that my higher self is trying to do with this lifetime. Learn persistence and perseverance against adversity. It's clear. That's a cosmic virtue. You master that. That's some cred. When I get back to the other side, as long as I don't kill myself, there'll be cred there. Karmic cred.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll spend it on a celebrity lifetime next. I'm obsessed with pop singers. Maybe I'll come back. You do an easy one next time because this one was so rough. It's celebrities, by the way. That's what they are. They're on vacations because they've come out of 2 or 3 rough lifetimes in a row. So they're like, fuck it, this time I'm going to be Lana Del Rey or whatever. I've been listening to her every night.
Did you okay, during your lifetime, now it's more like a personal question, did you ever felt like some ataraxia, some like some silence in a way, like not driven by any ambition of or like keep going? I don't know, because like what I'm feeling now, like I was really excited. I was writing my second book. Is a little bit like the idea of the Faust and Mephistopheles. It comes with a contract, and I'm basically denying the contract, and it's called the Dionysus Disciple. And the third book that I was writing was fiction, and I was really excited about writing that book. But as time went by, of course, my job and the thing that gives me money is just something that I do. Like I help people to have money, and I can focus on my things. But now the moment that I'm going is that profound inner ataraxia, but like because I was wondering, like I was thinking to myself, am I depressed? Like I was trying to understand if I was depressed. And the French writer Victor Hugo says that melancholy is the happiness of being sad. But I was just like aimless, like I would say, like I couldn't see, like I was like, this is enough.
That's a good model from the Law of Attraction books. This was the medium and her husband are from Scottsdale, Arizona, where I'm from, and they channeled a group of beings that call themselves the Abraham beings. Who knows why? And so they go through all the books about the law of attraction and the dynamics of it, how it all works. And it was reading those books that finally got me to click on it, synchronicity and morphic resonance and so forth. But they say you have an emotional guidance system, and it's there for a reason, which is to say that if you are feeling negative emotion of whatever kind, anger, jealousy, envy, sadness, it's your soul telling you you're miscreating. You're not creating right now, you're miscreating. You're out of alignment. When you are doing that which you came here to do, and you'll know it because while you're doing it, you feel in the flow. You feel harmonious with your life. And if you keep on with that, keep away from negative emotions and situations that you know are going to stimulate those negative emotions, like a bad job. You don't like your job, it's making you depressed, quit and walk out. I can't tell you how many times I've done that, and what a liberating feeling it is. It's your emotions are telling you you're in the wrong situation. Find the right one where you feel happy most of the time. And consequently, my default used to be depression. It's the opposite now. My 90% of the time, I'm happy now because I'm just doing what I came here to do. Write, learn, teach, make books. That's all I do now, full time. It took me forever. I had to punch a cash register for most of my life in bookstores to get to this point. This is only recent, past 7 years or so, roughly. But it took a lot of that, figuring that out. If you're depressed for a reason. What's the reason? Fix it and move on. Go away from it. Go to a situation where you don't feel depressed. And then you'll keep attracting more and more of that opposite of depression. It'll, as they say, they have a line that says, the better it gets, the better it gets. And part of the way you do that is by thinking good thoughts. Thoughts Gratitude. They say, go on a rampage of appreciation. You can do it when you're in the postal line or driving in your car. Oh, that's a beautiful house over there. Look at that cool tree. You're out on a walk and you're admiring all the trees. That's a rampage of appreciation. So you keep doing that, and the better it gets, because the more of those good feelings you will attract through morphic resonance. It has nothing to do with ethics. Again, it's metaphysics, morphic resonance. Like thoughts attract like situations and like things. It's law. That's what they say. It's law of attraction. Same thing as gravity. It's a law for a reason. Same thing as law of attraction. So yeah, if you're sad most of the time, I understand the romance of it. I was that way too. I went through college like that. It's fun to be melancholy. It's not. There may be some beauty in it, but it's not. It's your emotions telling you, get out of whatever situation it is that's making you feel that way and gravitate towards a better one. Even if it's only a slightly better one, just keep moving toward the better situation and it'll snowball.
So, it's not like sadness. It's like more stillness, more like
you might be talking about the sensibilities of a poet. Then that's a different thing. Yeah, where you're in touch with the sigh of things.
Yeah,
there's a sadness in things, like a Japanese haiku.
Exactly. Yeah.
Captures the infinity on a grain of sand. Like Blake says. Yeah, that's a poetic sensibility.
The idea of Shoran.
I've been that way my entire life. I've always had that sort of melancholy yearning. That's sort of, it's still there, but now I channel it into the writing of poetry that's gotten better and better over time. I started out writing poetry. I think I wrote my first poetry in high school, actually, and then didn't write any in college because I was focusing on short fiction. And then after I got out of college, I started writing a whole bunch of poetry, and then walked away from it and went back to the novel, namely the one I just finished, Every Angel is Terrifying. That novel, I worked on the early version of it when I was just out of my Saturn return, after I published my first book, Twilight of the Clockwork God. And that was a really successful Saturn return. So I'm anticipating the second one to replicate the success of that first one. And then wanted to go back to fiction. So I wrote the novel, about half of it actually, and then got frustrated with it and then didn't go back to it for 30 years. Now, Saturn brings you back into a situation either that you were in 30 years ago or 15 years ago when it's in opposition to itself. It'll bring you back to a situation that you left unfinished. And I wasn't paying attention to this. I was just a couple of years ago going through a trunk. I said, what's this? Every Angel's Terrifying. Oh, that was a novel I was working on. I was like 30 years old. Started reading it, and I thought, this actually isn't bad. Turning the pages, and I was like, I know how I can fix this. I got it. Went straight to the computer, started typing up the new version of it. It came back to me. That's a Saturn cycle.
Yeah.
Brings it back. You finish it. Now it's done. So watch for those Saturn cycles. It actually moves in 7-year cycles. Every 7 years, you'll cross a threshold of some kind. You just finished your first Saturn return at age 30. That happens at age 28 and 29. Then 30, you're done. And you're not the same person. You're mature now. Playtime's over. You're well aware of that. It's time to get serious about what it is you came here to do. And that's why you contacted me. You're thinking these thoughts. You want to know, what should I do next? Playtime's over. Now, this is why people join the 27 Club, as my girlfriend did. She had just turned 28. A month later, she shot herself. Basically, the 27 Club, which is, they get like these celebrities like James Dean, or not Dean, but Jim Morrison. There's a whole bunch of them. They don't want to grow up. They don't want to. They know they're going to face a whole bunch of responsibilities. They've had so much fun in their 20s. They want to stay young. They're afraid of being an adult. They don't realize that life is made up of 3 Saturn cycles. You got 30, you got 60, and you got 90. Each one of them completes a phase of your life. The first phase is all about playtime. I'm in a new body. What kinds of crazy things can I do with this body? Go bungee jumping, crazy sex, whatever. What kinds of things can I do? The middle period is the work period, the workhorse period. It's time to get serious, do the work, get it done, so that when you get to that age 60, now it's Saturn with reaping with the scythe, reaping the harvest. Now you're just coasting for that last cycle, reaping the harvest of the work that you put in during that middle 30-year period. And it really does work that way. It's 3 distinct Saturn cycles. And that's just how it's set up metaphysically and so forth. Saturn is my highest planet. So I obviously, when I incarnated, knew very well that it was going to be about patience. And then Mercury is the other one. Mercury is the intellect, and it's punctuated with a square to Uranus conjunct Pluto. That's a mind that wants to get to the bottom of things. Pluto's down there in the underworld. You want to get to the bottom of things in the unusual way, which is Uranus, which is the planet of innovation, thinking outside the box. Those two were conjunct all through the 1960s. When they do conjoin, it correlates with a period of social rebellion and revolution. They were an aspect during the French Revolution, during the 1848 revolutions, and so on down the line. So I came out of that generation of rebellion. So I have that. I knew I wasn't going to go through academia. I was going to be outside the box. With those two planets conjunct, and I'm born absolutely, and they're forming a square to Mercury. This is going to be a mind who wants to know stuff about everything. And my Mercury's in Gemini, which is Mercury rules Gemini, so it's exalted there. So those are my two primary planets, and it's obvious from this is why you can look at a person's chart and you can find the primary theme of what you came here to do by just understanding the angles between the planets. You really can. I've done this over and over again, and I've had clients come back to me after a couple of years and said, "You were right about that situation." I said, "Yep, I wasn't right. It's your chart. It's preset for what kinds of situations that you're going to be in."
Yeah, we have a very famous Portuguese writer called Fernando Pessoa. He's a poet, and
I haven't read it, but I've heard of him.
Yeah, he had we call it heteronyms because he created multiple poetic personalities, and he make astral, like he did astrology for them as well. So
I didn't know. So he's Portuguese.
He's Portuguese, and he was like really deep into astrology, so much so that he created different.
Were you Portuguese?
Yes, I'm Portuguese.
I didn't know that. I thought you were from South America.
No,
Portuguese. Okay.
Yeah, I'm Portuguese, and I always found it quite interesting. But and probably
you must have read before I forget. Saramago.
Of course, of course. Yeah.
Well, Saramago blizzard hit me, one novel after the next. It's just blowing.
Yeah, of course. But I think you will really like Fernando Pessoa as well. It's more poetry, obviously, but he has these different poetic personalities as well. He has one that is more pragmatic, another one that is more about the feelings, and he creates different poems for these different personalities. Quite unique in the poetry realm in a way, and he had like astral charts for every poetic personality that he creates. So he really and he had different writing for the poetic personalities that he has. So it's like so it's quite interesting that
probably channeling them then.
He was.
Yeah.
And even in Portugal, there was a restaurant where I used to go, like in the walls, there's like the charts and everything. And that was my first contact and my first because I remember being young. And of course, you grow up in this materialistic approach, and you discard everything because you think it's like superstition or that way. But I remember thinking to myself, how come like such a smart and intellectual person that has this deep understanding? Like,
I'm definitely going to read Pessoa then. Thanks for that's a definite, because that's rare to find. Writers who take astrology seriously know how to do it.
It did so much so that he even met Aleister Crowley once. He went to Portugal because he wanted to meet him, just because he did like the charts of him, and he corrected him in some analysis. And he went there to simulate his death, Aleister Crowley, like over there in a place called Cascais in Portugal. So that was quite interesting. But I remember being young and thinking to myself, like how come, and even the same with alchemy happened as well, because I was thinking, seeing is like getting in touch with this and doing this research about these deep thinkers, and I was thinking, such an intellectual and smart person, like how come he believes in this? And that was my first approach, like, and you need to be humble just to accept it as well, not reject it. And that was like the first approach that I got really into it, like and started to like be more deep in astrology as well, and trying to understand. And my question to you would be like, was it because that event eventually opened just like my pursuit for all the spiritual endeavors, and like even this, my psychedelic experience was on that track, it was on that journey as well, and I was really like trying to figure out, but never losing touch with reality. That's the reason why I was even saying about Buddhism, because like that all detachment and breaking samsara and go and reaching nirvana, getting out, is almost, and Maya, the idea of like this is all like all a play, and the spiritual realm is the most important. It was really important to be always anchored in the physical world and having this physicality. But when was the first time, and was it groundbreaking for you? Because for me now, it still is a little bit, because I envy that. I remember like my not suicidal thoughts, but it's mostly like going back seems like the way to go. Like it's just like you endure here, this existential dread that you have, like it's almost like, but once you're aware of different realms, of different like the spiritual ideas, like it's just like it's predictable, like the human flaw, the greed, the ambition for more and more, like. So was it groundbreaking for you when you first got in touch with astrology and reincarnation thought?
Well, no, these were simple things, because I learned astrology at age 30 so that I could interview the astrologer Richard Parnas. I don't know if you know who he is, who wrote Psyche and Cosmos. So he told me what books to read, so I went and studied it so I could understand what the hell he was talking about. So I did that interview for my first book, and that's when I figured it out. I knew that it worked, but I set it aside because I didn't want to be just a mere astrologer. I wanted to be a thinker and a writer and a poet and so forth. So I set it aside and didn't bring it back into my life. Even though I was reading Rudolf Steiner, I took Steiner with a grain of salt. The reincarnation might be real, might not. I don't know, but it sure is fascinating the way he articulates himself about it. That's sort of how I took Steiner for several decades until I had a divorce. I turned 40 and got divorced. And then I remember maybe it was 41 or 42 when I went on a binge on YouTube. By that point, there were all these near-death experiencers on there. And I binge watched through their stuff. And I realized, I guess the soul does survive the death of the body and reincarnation is real. Steiner was right about that. So there again, I bracketed it and set that aside so I could continue writing my critical theory books and so forth. But then what happened was my mother died. And I was 48 at the time, and she died. And my brother and I were not there when it happened, so we felt guilty about it. And I remembered hearing that you could use a medium to talk to your dead relatives that you have unresolved issues about. So I looked up a medium, found one, made the appointment, and then she said, give her about 2 weeks to get acclimated over there, and then we'll talk in about 2 weeks. So we get back on, my brother and I, and she says, oh, your mother's here and your grandmother's here as well. I was like, wait a minute. My grandmother died 4 days after my mother, but I didn't tell the medium that. How does the medium know that? So that was point number one in her favor. So then my brother and I started talking about our mother, and we realized it was mom pretty quickly. The medium couldn't possibly imitate her things she would laugh at, wry jokes she would make, uniquely her. Okay, so it's real then, this whole paradigm that Steiner was talking about, all of that's real. But then I got this idea, and I thought, I was aware of a YouTube channel called Channeling Eric, where about a dead kid who committed suicide at age 20 and came back, and all these different mediums use him to talk to celebrities. So they're talking to Elvis Presley and the Buddha and all these people. And I thought, I wonder if any of these mediums have ever interviewed dead philosophers. And I'm willing to bet that no one has. I'm going to try it. an interview with Oswald Spengler because I'll know it's him. So I find a woman who's a Buddhist in India, Shruti Campbell, and we talked to Spengler. It was Spengler. There's no question about it. Then we went through about seven. Spengler. We talked to Joseph Campbell, Marshall McLuhan, Jean Gebser, Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, and we even talked to Lucy, the hominid. I think that was the last one we did in that series. And that was all a lot of fun. Those videos are up there. They're on YouTube if you want to watch them. And it was definitely those guys. There's no question about it. So that went on. I moved up here to Santa Fe after she died. And that went on for about the first 6 months that I lived here in this was 2017. Right, 2017. And then my girlfriend that I had met in 2016 and had gone to live with her. She was a webcam model, and I'd gone to live with her, fell madly in love with her, went to live with her in St. Petersburg for 2 months was all I could take with her doing her webcam in the other room. No fucking way. That the jealousy levels were off the charts.
Of course.
How come you're doing stuff for these guys that you don't do in our bedroom? You know, that kind of shit.
Yeah.
You know, men have egos. I mean, come on now. So we broke up temporarily, as it turned out. It was always temporary. No matter what, even death, temporary. So I went back and I wrote all these poetry books that I'm currently now republishing in high-res editions, mostly with her as my muse, Gravity Girl. And we got back together over the phone, and I would read the poems about her in Gravity Girl to her every night. She would just break down and cry. That's how I knew they were good. Very high, didn't like pop culture. Not only was she a Luddite, she didn't like, kind of a snob, actually. So if she says they're good, they're good. So I knew I was onto something good. So I wrote a bunch of those books and then moved up. Mom died, moved up here, did those interviews. And then 2018, we got back together again over the phone. I just randomly, in April of 2018, said, hey, you still around? I'm out of the sex industry now. I'm living in Hawaii on a farm, student exchange. And I thought, well, great. And maybe now we can have a relationship with all that stuff out of the way. And so we did. As that summer evolved, the 4 or 5 months, it was the best time of our relationship. We were talking for about 2 hours every night, making each other laugh, doing funny things with culture, showing each other images on the internet of cool, weird animals and so forth. And then we broke up because she started to go seriously mentally ill, schizophrenic. She started calling me Seth. She started saying I must be a demon from another world that came here to torment her. I was like, you can't be serious. And she's like, I'm dead serious. So she went off the rails, and that ended that. Once I realized I was in love with a mad woman, I mean, how do you make that work?
Yeah.
You just can't. But I still was in love with her. We just weren't talking. So then in January, then 2019, she turned 28 on December 11th. So I get a Gmail, and she says, I just bought myself a 38 caliber revolver, and I'm about to pull the trigger. What do you think of that? So I sit down. I spent the next hour frantically trying to talk her out of it. Didn't work. She pulled the trigger anyway. And so that was that. And that was probably the worst night of my life.
Jesus, I can't even imagine the situation. But you got in touch with her?
The upside was that I already had this paradigm in place. I knew I could use a medium to talk to the bitch. So we did. We went through several mediums, actually, going back and forth, having fun conversations, but also more jealous ones. That issue was not resolved. And I could not get those more revelations through those conversations that upset me even more. So we talked, we wore out various mediums over about 2 years, going back and forth. We did a lot of fun experiments that I'll tell you about sometime if you want to hear them. They're really cool stuff that proved that she was with me, and as she still is now to this day. And then I decided I've got to not talk to her anymore because this wound needs to heal. And I knew that we were under, both of us, a transit, the worst transit you can get, Pluto square Saturn. It's the worst you can get. And if Pluto doing the transiting, it's a 3-year ordeal. So I knew that if I just could survive until springtime of 2022, I would feel good again. that's exactly what happened. I used astrology to predict that I would heal and come out and feel better. That's when I started turning back to her stuff, to her journals. I found the old novel, combined them with her journals, fell back in love with her again after writing these two novels featuring her as the main character in them. I changed her name, but it's her, based on her. And I told her I was going to do this way back when she was alive, and I was writing the poetry cycle about her, Gravity Girl. I told her, I said, you know what I'm going to do, Mary? I'm going to transform you into the American equivalent of Alice. And I'm going to send you wandering across all these different knowledge landscapes. You know how Alice does. She's always asking funny little questions, making wry, sardonic remarks and so forth. I'm going to do that to you. She didn't believe me. And then here I've just done it with these two novels that I published last year and the year before. And the reports from my literary friends who know good literature are good. So they must be good, because you get the opinion of someone whose opinion you respect, then you're all peers. You're all playing on the same. Yeah. So, and then she came back into my life then, and recently, about 6 months ago, I started talking to her again with mediums and letting her back in, and now she's around, and she plays all these little poltergeisty pranks on me now. She moves my books around, and she always does it when I'm not looking, because I like to have stacks of books that are perfectly straight. I don't like them crooked, and she knows that. I'll turn back and look, and the fucking stack is crooked. The whole stack. And she keeps doing it. And I confirmed this with the current medium that I use right now. And she said, yeah, she's doing all kinds of shit. She does stuff on you when you're asleep and you don't even know about it. She's making loud noises in the kitchen and so forth. So it's all very funny, because she knows I think it's funny, and reassures me that she's still around. She's interested in what I'm doing. She's following the books, and she likes them a lot. So that's good. So we're having fun. Once again, like I said, this relationship never ends. Nothing apparently can stop it. And so I've learned from the mediums too that this is an old story with us. We've been going through incarnation after incarnation together with all kinds of crazy romantic relationships, jealous relationships, three-way problems. She's the other woman, or we might switch sexes. It's always crazy. So apparently we think it's fun, even though it's painful physically, but apparently we think this is fun. So that's our karma. And since I've forgiven her for everything, I think I've changed the karma. Because the medium had told me that the problem is you never forgive her. Back when you were John Dee, for instance, the Elizabethan philosopher, she was your wife, Jane Froman, and they were wife swapping, and Kelly got her pregnant with Theodore, their son, and Dee never forgave her. The medium said his heart just froze. And that's an example of where we're going to repeat it, obviously. And so we have. So hopefully I'm hoping this time that I don't feel jealous feelings anymore, and I don't feel anger about either the suicide or the affairs and so forth. I just don't care about that anymore. It doesn't matter. It's only love that matters.
Yes.
After all, it's the emotion, of which all other emotions, it's like light going through a prism rather, and a prison too, because the prison is a prism of light, a prison of light. And the colors think that's all. There's just 7 of us. You don't realize that these are all harmonic intervals playing on the emotion of love, which is stronger than any other love. It's the thing that matters the most, and the thing that we incarnate for, to try and improve upon. So that's the story that, in a nutshell. It's keeping me going, and I'm having a lot of fun. Every day I wake up and I'm like back to work, every single day. I'm almost done with my reworking of Gilgamesh, which is great. Yeah, it's great because it's so much better now, and the AI illustrations are mind-boggling. They're so damn good.
Yeah, I'm using AI to do dream interpretation. Like every time I have a dream, I go in AI and I try to put it like in an image to archive like those dreams.
He approached me, some publishing company approached me, and they said they wanted permission to give an AI permission to extract a book based on all my videos as the database. So they gave it access to the database of all my videos, and the book it spat out was mostly gobbledygook. Badly organized. Some of it was good, but the part on Mary Church was spot on. It was unbelievable. it understood her better almost than I did. It was amazing. So yeah, it does. It's got room for improvement, but we're probably still with AI about where we were with film when it was silent movies. That's probably about how many awesome things it's going to deliver to us. Hopefully nothing terrible.
Yeah, but only angels. We're terrified of angels, right? So it reminds me, that book reminds me sorry?
Have you read Rilke?
No, I didn't. I did not. I have here some references that I have to read now. That excites me. Yeah.
Still read the genealogy.
But that reminds me of the book of the title reminds me anime, a Japanese anime that I also think has a lot of philosophy there. That is called Neo Genesis Evangelion. It's like this.
I haven't seen it.
It's these fallen angels that come back to wipe out human existence, and it's very inspired in the Kabbalistic rituals, because humans, they live underworld and they create these three giant robots that are called Adam, Eve, and Lilith, just inspired in Kabbalah, and the only children can access it to it. But the main goal, then the plot gets very convoluted, but the main goal is to be everyone to be a collective existence, like a mind hive, but like it's like this orange liquid and something like that. But it's like so basically like the species are unredeemable. So the idea is to become a collective again. That's the only way. Otherwise, the fallen angels will try their best to wipe out and exterminate humanity. But that's the thing. Yeah, it's
a lot of fantasy that touches on, because they're channeling. Again, they're getting information that they think is they're just making up, but they're not.
Yeah.
Like James Cameron's Avatar films are corrupt. We're avatars. He's got it right.
Yeah.
He probably doesn't think that. He's just his imagination, and it's just science fiction, but it's actually correct. Yeah. We're given assignments on Pandora, and what are you going to do with your assignment? You better get going. My brother and I got to.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, I was about to say. Well, thank you very much for this wonderful conversation. And
absolutely,
it was really like wonderful. I was super excited to talk with you. Of course, there's even more, but like for the first one, it was wonderful.
Yeah. All right. I hope this has been of some help. Are you going to post this on a channel somewhere, or what do you?
Yes, I'm going to post it on my YouTube channel as well. So as soon as I'm going to edit and like try to make sure that I have like try to illustrate all the references that we've been using, so it's more easy to understand, and for people that can watch. But for sure, and there's an open conversation, and so I'll try to see if But I think it was wonderful, and it really helped me in a personal level as well. Thank you very much, John.
I think our crew and your crew and we enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's what matters. Well, bye then.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.